Hi, you're now listening to Entrepreneur First India Unfiltered, where we take a hard look at the highs and lows of the entrepreneurial journey alongside thought leaders in the Indian startup ecosystem. With me, Esha Tiwary, General Manager at EF India. The last year may have seemed like the most unlikely time to start a business. However, we've seen the cohort members at EF rise to the challenge. Today, we're talking about what it was like to build a startup during the pandemic with two founders who did just that. They'll share their story, how they met each other at EF and started up, while successfully adapting and growing their businesses during the pandemic. Let's start with introductions. Zaraif, over to you first. Tell us a little bit about yourself and help the audience understand you.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be connecting and to be able to talk to all of you a little bit about our journey. So as for myself, I'm Zaraif Hossain. I'm from Bangladesh, and I'm a part of the BA3 cohort in Bangalore of EF. So before EF, I spent the beginning of my career, 3.5 years, with PepsiCo's first snacks franchise operations in the world. They did so in 3 alpha markets, Bangladesh and Philippines out of the 2. I forget the third one. It was an exciting journey. I saw the challenges of the sort of unorganized retail that's there across developing markets and general operational challenges that enterprises tend to face. And I felt that now was the right time to figure out a scalable, technology-driven solution to solve these problems. And the thesis was, why not solve a problem that I've seen before, face myself, and then hopefully scale that to other organizations across the world. And so far, it's been working. So that's about me.
Super. Thank you, Zaraif. Ravi, tell us about yourself.
Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Ravi. I'm the co-founder and CEO of MedPay. I come with more than 12 years experience working in healthcare, building healthcare startups in the past. So I've always been in healthcare, I think, since 2006. Right. So coming from the domain, I've always inclined towards creating large impact in this ecosystem. Right. Especially coming from Indian ecosystem. Right. There is so much to do in healthcare. People generally get lost. Right. And that's where over a period of time, I was waiting for the right time to create impact in OPD insurance space. Right. And at the same time, coming from being a serial entrepreneur in this space, I know the challenges of finding the right co-founder. Right. That's where, thanks to EF, from EF, I got introduced to a fantastic co-founder, and that's where we started the journey of MedPay. And today at MedPay, we are building an AI-powered platform, helping insurance companies access a large network of primary healthcare and also process cashless claims in real time. Right. That's a bit of my background. Thanks.
Super. And I can vouch for what Ravi said. Ravi and his co-founder Arun, if you meet them, you'll feel like they've known each other for years. And I think it's the same for Zaraif and Anshul as well. And we'll come to some of these topics. Very quickly, let me introduce myself too. I'm Esha Tiwary, and I lead EF in India. We launched EF in India in January last year. Since then, we have invested in over 20 startups, and both Zaraif and Ravi are from our most recent cohort of startups out of Bangalore. So today, also, I just want to set some context, right? Like, I think the world has changed very rapidly in 2020. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the memes doing the circles on how you don't need any decorations in Halloween. 2020 was enough of a scary notion. But it's also become really apparent to everybody that this is a long-term play, right? The world is changing rapidly, and a lot of these changes are here to stay. So on a lot of people's minds, the thought is that if I did ever want to start a company, should I wait it out? Like, should I wait for the next couple of years for some sense of normalcy to return? Or should I take advantage of all the consumer behavior changes happening right now and really jump into it? So I think that's kind of the context. And so let's kick this off. I'd love to talk first about a little bit of the early process you both went through. So, you're both very different in your backgrounds. Zarif, this is your first startup. Ravi, as you mentioned, you've had a couple of startups before. So, give us both of your perspectives on the early journey. How did you find the co-founder at EF? How did you kind of fix on what you'd like to work on? So maybe Zarif, you want to go first.
Sure, absolutely. So the story typically, as it does for most of who we had in our cohort and really across EF's network, the journey starts way before you actually apply to EF. And that's when, you have this experience where throughout you're trying to solve problems, you're trying to create something new in whatever shape or form, whether it's an organization you're already in or whether it's through founding a startup beforehand. And so that drive was always there. And so as I explained, my experience largely has been in the consumer goods industry and really working in the operations and business part of that. So the struggle that I had was similar to Ravi's. Who was this person that I was supposed to take a bet on and somebody who was supposed to take a bet on me to really count on each other to build something that's potentially, globally impactful. So then EF has that offering. They're like, we're going to bring together the brightest minds and we're going to help you find the right co-founders. So took a leap of faith to EF. And the early process really was more than anything discovering who you are yourself. And I think really EF helped with that. There's a concept of edge, which is as an individual, you have certain expertise and experiences that put you ahead of anybody else who's trying to start a company. So as for myself, EF really helped me discover my own edge, my own expertise, where I would edge out other potential founders, potentially globally. And then that sort of becomes accentuated to a whole new level when you start mixing with the different people in the cohort and you start talking to people whose skill sets are not just awesome on their own right, but who together with your expertise create something so incredible that without the two of you, it probably would not be possible. And so after really figuring out a little bit more about myself throughout the early days at EF, I bumped into Anshul. Actually, Anshul and I were talking about a bunch of different ideas way early on, even before we met physically. But somehow we went through a bunch of different teams. I went through 3 different teams, actually, with 3 different potential co-founders. But then the way I knew that Anshul was the right co-founder is when he brought in this expertise of having built some of the globally cutting edge AI products for the consumer goods space, the space that I was familiar with, as well as the retail space. And he brought this understanding of my space, and I brought the understanding of what he was building. And so together, we came up with the idea of Retail Pulse in less than 24 hours, and that's how it clicks, right? We understood each other. We had a very clear vision that aligned almost immediately, and that's what really started the journey. And so right now we are building Retail Pulse, and it's a computer vision-based AI solution for the consumer goods industry, especially in developing markets. So through simple smartphone images, you click a picture of a store, we capture everything in there and derive deep insights for our customers who range from the largest food and beverages companies, personal care companies, etc., as you can imagine. So I guess for me, the early days was all about self-discovery and then really finding what clicked with another individual and then taking a bet on them and them taking a bet on you.
Nice. Thanks, Zarif. Ravi, tell us about your early process at EF.
Sure. Thanks, Esha. I joined EF solely for the reason of finding the right co-founder. But I ended up with gaining a lot. It's not just only finding the co-founder, right? We gained a lot from the cohort. But the initial process for me is more of how do I evaluate the person that I'm looking for, right? Especially I come from the healthcare background, right? What I was particularly looking at is someone who is passionate about working in healthcare, right? For me, it's not about technology skills; it's about passion in the industry, right? Skill sets in terms of technology can always be developed, right? But I can't create a passion for him to develop over a period of time, right? So that's where I was talking continuously with number of people, and the kind of people that I met at EF cohort was amazing, right? Believe me, these are not the kind of people that you met at your nearby coffee shops, right? That's where I got super lucky in meeting Arun Bhatia at EF. And EF also kind of helped us in terms of assessing or asking the hard questions, right? It's not like you just exchange few ideas and then you end up forming a team. It's also about asking the hard questions, finding the right dynamics. So over a period of first 3 months that we have spent, So a lot of dynamics were tested. That's what we call it as a stress testing at EF. Again, thanks to EF. So we had a lot of hard conversations, and the journey was great. So I strongly feel and believe the kind of partnership we were able to establish is fantastic. And because of the right team in place, we were able to achieve the kind of traction which is unbelievable to any other startup when you actually compare. Right. So that was my initial process.
I agree with that. And I promise you guys, I have not paid these two to say all of those nice and flowery things. There's a huge amount of credit to the ambition and the ability of both of these and their co-founders for what they've achieved so far. So I want to delve a little bit deeper, right? And like kind of bringing the context of the pandemic in here. It's hard enough to build co-founder relationships in early days of a startup as is, and then you add a pandemic, multiple waves of lockdown to it, and of course all of the uncertainty around you. So talk a bit about how you kind of build a strong relationship with your respective co-founders, how you built out the trust, and how you work together while the pandemic was in full force. Zaref, you want to begin?
Sure, sure. So it's actually the interesting story for me, because as I mentioned, EF is a roughly 14-week program at the beginning stage, which is the form phase. And at that stage, honestly, things were very unclear for me. So by the time I got to my co-founder, who is Anshul Gupta, it was I think it was 5 days before India went into a complete lockdown, and it's been the toughest lockdown in the world has seen. And so the odds were really against us. And by that time, I'd been through 3 different teams. Well, the first sign of actually getting an indication that this was going to be a partnership which was rock solid is the fact that we clicked before anything as friends. Um, I think that's extremely important because we both knew that there are a lot of ups and downs. And honestly, just this year, being around for about 8, 9 months, we've been through a ton of ups and downs. And also, like, our bond has been tested multiple times, but we've held together extremely strong, which gives us the confidence that we will be able to go through any tough time. And so, really, 5 days until a massive lockdown, here we were trying to brainstorm how to do it. We got lucky. We realized that we actually were staying 2 minutes from each other, and so even during the lockdown, what we really prioritized over everything else is really to get to know each other, because our ideas clicked, our visions aligned. But what we realized is that what would really help us succeed down the line is forming a strong bond that would last through any up and down. And so it would honestly go through points of just brainstorming and working hours on end together, but then ending the day by just like having dinner together and just talking about life and our own stories, because we all got here in different ways. So I think that really helped us. Also, just being able to sit together and talk about where we see this going, in the next 2 years and 3 years. When you start talking about even hard questions, and I think this is something that EF pushed us to discuss early on. They said, you know what, test these out early on, which is we had to ask tough questions like, in 2 years and 3 years, where do you see this business going? And you need to be aligned on that. You don't really talk about those. You start talking about what are your priorities in life, right? And I mean, we bonded over the fact that we prioritize our families over everything, family first, and that's one of the core values that we're building into the company. Another thing that we often talked about was, let's say that this doesn't work out. Let's say we don't get funded by EF. What do we do next? We aligned on those points as well. And it goes down to as simple as, what do you like to do in your free time, or when are working hours for you? Do you mind working at 11 o'clock at night? So just those hard things to talk about, to flesh out together, to come to an understanding and build a friendship way at the beginning, is what's really held us together even till date. And I think that's really the core fabric which will keep us together as a strong team throughout the journey of Retail Pulse.
Amazing. Ravi, tell us a little bit about how you built the bond with your co-founder while all of this was going on around you.
Sure. Thanks, Isha. So for me, it was a bit of different story. So one of the advantage that I personally took is, before actually joining EF, the moment you have the offer letter, so EF has a dashboard wherein which they introduce to different people who have accepted the offer letter. Some informal introductions starts before the joining date. that's the time I have actually taken the advantage, right? I started meeting people, talking to people. I met Arun before joining EF because of EF, right? And then that actually helped me in forming the team very early, right? Which is very important, I feel, right? Otherwise, the initial few months, you end up trying to break up teams or trying to find new teams, experiment. So rather, I would advise people to form teams as soon as possible, right? And So because we were able to form team early, we were able to stress test the relationship before COVID, and during the COVID, suddenly everything changed, right? And one of the habit that we developed is every weekend at EF we used to get pizza parties, right? And we were continuing it even after EF at COVID. What we used to do is now everything shifted to virtual, and every Friday evenings and every weekends. So we ensure that all of our team members, although we are a small team, so gets a pizza via Swiggy or some online app, and then we come together, not the business. It's just more about relaxing talks, talk about anything or any crazy ideas that we want to try out. So that's how we started building relations post COVID or during the COVID stage. And so that's how we were able to manage the relations. We were able to hire more people remotely. It's a completely new experience, definitely. And we even experimented with number of softwares which can replicate the feel of the office, and we ended up in fact working with couple of apps are very good. Every morning Arun, me and everyone used to come to the office virtually, and we can talk to each other. It's almost like feeling as if like we are sitting under one roof, but it's not, right? But that's how we all adopted, and that's how we build the relations now, and it's going on very well.
Amazing. I think, Ravi, you've touched upon a really important point, right? Which is, culture building in the teams, of course, very important in general, especially early days of the startup, but even more so, like with the pandemic, there's a lot of innovation that needs to happen in terms of how do you virtually, I mean, you make it sound easy, it's really not. So, well done focusing on this, but it's really nice to hear the different ways in both of you, in which both of you have kind of worked on building relationships within each other with your co-founder, but also within your expanded team. Super. So let's move on to the business side of things, right? Like, you've got your co-founder, you figured out what you need to work on, but now it's time to really show some, show some traction. And one of the things I've realized is, speaking to a lot of VCs, is that traction is king, right? And especially during the pandemic, no one's discounting the amount of traction that you need to show, right? In fact, even more so, investors, other stakeholders, and possibly EF2 with you guys has looked for how can you be resilient, how can you adapt through all the different challenges, still continue to acquire customers, etc. Right? So, talk a little bit about some specific challenges you faced while looking at building customer relationships, acquiring customers, and some of the things you guys did to overcome those challenges. Zaraif, now you're always going first.
I'm always going first. It's a new norm, the new normal. Um, so I think first of all, if we're talking about traction, I think it's fair to put some context at the beginning, right? So the way that EF is structured, it's really a 6-month program. You've got the first 3 months where you're in form. If you get through IC, you go for another 3 months. So you go from an individual, you go through IC, if they fund you, you're a company, and then you continue like a normal accelerator for another 3 months. So I think it's important to set the context first that in these 6 months, what you achieve, most startups will not achieve in 6 months. And I think you're pushed to do that because you are kind of have this forcing function. You've got all these incredible teams with some of the brightest people you've ever met in your life, and they're all fighting for those few investments that EF is going to make. So I think the first thing to say is I think it's 2 to 3x of what happens in normal scenario. You move much faster during those 6 months, and you're kind of nobody tells you to do it, but it's a forcing function, informal forcing function that's there that causes you to do so. So what I will say is that the traction that we've been able to achieve over the last 9 months has been pretty great. So we went from absolutely nothing in March to now actually having some of the largest consumer goods companies in the world as our customers, and it's increasing every day. Um, I think the biggest challenge was actually the narrative, and being able to kind of work around what this pandemic meant for our customers. So I think there was a shift in back in April where there was a huge lockdown. Everybody had this intention where they were like, I'm going to stop everything. I'm going to just focus on exactly what I have, not going to do anything new. And I'm going to continue to optimize my existing operations. And that was not just for our customers, but that's also for what we were hearing about investors at the time. They were going to be doubling down on their existing portfolio. They were not going to make new investments. We were hearing that across everything, but we kind of chose to put blinders on. We said, you know what, we're going to continue doing what we set out to do. It's do or die, go big or go home. And that was the attitude that both Anshul and I had right from the get-go. And so why I talk about narrative is because we slowly saw a transformation from April onwards. We saw, if I talk about investors first, investors started seeing, wait, you know what? This pandemic might be a huge reset in the world, but there are a lot of opportunities which have been accelerated like 100 times what it was before the pandemic. I'm going to double down on those. So investment has continued generally from what we've seen. And then in terms of customers, we saw customers shift from I'm just going to focus on exactly what I'm doing and continue my operations into transitioning into, you know what, technology can actually help me adapt better to the situation, become more agile and data driven, so that I can actually capitalize on the tougher times and win market share and win the market. So we had to kind of sense that that's where our customers, we had to follow the customer. And by following the customer to where they actually saw value with the completely new situation, we kind of started to tailor both our story, our pitch, and our approach to them in that manner. And that really helped us get through to the customers and prove to them that even during these times, we were actually going to be providing them real value. And that's how we were able to really crack, some of the biggest customers out there in this short amount of time.
You raise a really good point there, Zaraif, right? Which is how suddenly it's become evident to everybody, all sorts of customers included, that the adoption of technology is key. So, earlier where you'd have to travel across the length and breadth of the country for meetings, even initial meetings. Now everybody's doing it virtually, right? And that's just in communications, but also from a solutions perspective, everyone's thinking about how do we solve these new problems with technology. And that's really interesting, right? Because that's where you seem to have kind of found your way in to solve new problems more innovatively for these customers. Ravi, tell us about your side. Tell us about some challenges you faced specifically as you were building the business due to the pandemic, and tell us some ways in which you kind of address these challenges.
Sure. Thanks, Esha. Uh, for me, as a person, also, I am kind of habituated to speed. Right. I always talk about speed, speed, speed. Right. While my co-founder balances it with quality. Thanks to Arun for that. So otherwise, speed kills. Right. At the same time, during our journey at EF also stressed upon speed. Right. Especially in the Indian ecosystem, traction is one keyword. Right. So from day one of our journey, we are always focusing on the speed. Right. If you want to fail, speed is the key. Right. Probably your idea might be wrong. Right. So go out, execute very fast, fail fast. Right. That's how you emerge out with a model that works in the market. Right. So from that perspective, with the kind of speed approach that we are taking, before the COVID started, I think in the first week of March, I was lucky enough to travel to Mumbai, Pune, different cities, and I was able to meet traditional insurance companies in person, show them the demonstration of the solution, got some inputs, because these are all the traditional companies, right? And people, without actually meeting, you can't close the deals, right? That's how the situation was pre-COVID, right? And then suddenly COVID started, everything changed. Suddenly we are not able to talk to the same customer right after the demo, right? We were like super stressed right. But one of the things that we always got is continuous support from the EF. So that's something which is really valuable, right? It's not like when the whole world is against you, EF also says okay, nothing is going to happen. In spite of that, EF supported us well in terms of thinking us with the different ideas. How can we evolve out of this crisis? And that's when we realized the crisis is not just for us. The crisis is also for the insurance companies, right? Everyone are going through the same phase, right? And that has changed the behavior, the entire behavior of the customers, right? They started listening to technology solutions. over online. So we started meeting online, right? So that's where one of the key takeaways is also you should always be in closely in touch with your customer, and that's very important. During the COVID, we attempted and we tried to stay in contact with the customer as much as possible, trying to understand what is their experience, how are they evolving, right? So on top of it, we started building our strategies, right? And that's how we evolved. And today, as we are speaking, we are already working with thousands of doctors, thousands of pharmacies, diagnostic centers on one side, and we are closely working with one of the India's largest insurance company. Right, this is all possible because of the approach we have taken and the support we got from the year.
Amazing, guys. So you've kind of started to shift into this already, but basically, it sounds like while there was a lot of, there were a lot of challenges, and especially in the initial months when the pandemic hit, it also seems to be a silver lining in there, right? Like there seems to be a few opportunities that were unearthed and that were probably unexpected. So talk a bit about that. In the pandemic, what are some of these unexpected, interesting opportunities that you've seen and that you're trying to now kind of make the most of? Zaref?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we touched upon it a little bit, but I think the most significant trend is technology adoption at large, as we kind of mentioned. Because so the way we kind of, whenever we had our sessions with the EIRs at EAP, when we would run through our ideas, the main question that we were always asked is, okay, I get it, your technology is really cool, but how are you adding value to your customer? And only if you add real value to your customer are you really then going to be able to build a business out of it. And so that was a focus even before, well before the pandemic even hit us hard. And so really, again, it goes back to focusing on what value are you providing your customer. And what we've seen is that as long as you're providing that value to your customer, whether it's efficiency in terms of operational cost or whether it's upliftment of revenue, typically that's what happens for any B2B tech. What the customer will then understand is like, look, pandemic or not, adopting this technology will ultimately make me a lot more efficient, and it will increase my bottom line in either way. So I think it's just about communicating that properly to the customer, explaining to them how it's going to happen. And I think the biggest shift that we saw, as we mentioned, is COVID really, supercharged this whole technology adoption across the world. And as we saw, I'll give a small example as well, right? So as we mentioned, so for Retail Pulse, we built AI powered computer vision for the consumer goods industry. So what we saw is that in any case over the past few years, there was a rapidly shifting landscape in terms of consumer tastes and preferences, right? So think of the last time you went to the grocery store, before the pandemic. You probably bought a certain basket of goods and you typically go buy that most of the time, 80-90% of the time. That's vastly different than what somebody who's a millennial will be buying, and it's vastly different than the brands that a Gen Z enjoys at home as well. Now, what we saw is that there was a third dimension added to this because of COVID, which was a drastic shift in priorities as well. So the products that started going out of stock at stores, products that started becoming low in supply and much more high in demand, there was a complete tectonic shift because of the pandemic. And so not only has there been an existing change over the past few years on consumer tastes and preferences, but now there's a priority shift because of a pandemic. And again, being able to recognize that again by the sole principle of staying close and following your customer, are you able to say, you know what, our technology can solve this too. We can help you become agile organizations to identify this quicker, react to it better, and really improve your business and grow, even during such tough times. And so that is something we were able to sniff out. All of a sudden, I mean, this is going to sound funny now, but at the time, toilet paper was nowhere to be found, right? I remember in the middle of the pandemic, I was ordering Maggi noodles because I have no idea how to cook. So Maggi noodles was running out of everywhere, every store nearby. But that was the reality. What if at the time, companies could predict that to a bit better than what they were able to do, or understand the out of stock situation across a country better and react to that much faster? Imagine how much they would have boosted their sales during that period. And so this shift in consumer is going to continue, and companies are going to have to continue evolving. And so the pandemic kind of helped us pitch to them that, look, you faced a huge shift here. It's going to continue, maybe not to the same magnitude, but it's going to continue. Retail Pulse can help you. And that's how we got in.
Amazing. And you were able to identify this by staying really close to the customer, right? Really closely interacting with them, really understanding what new problems cropped up for them. kind of like what Ravi mentioned earlier as well. So Ravi, over to you. What new opportunities have you unearthed, and what has been the silver lining of the pandemic?
Sure. Thanks, Isha. Uh, so I would rather say in terms of one industry, in terms of the industry, healthcare industry, we all understand almost the demand for health insurance has increased by 30%. Right. So that is directly impacting the demand for the solution that we are building. Right. So that's one. Second, change in the user behavior. Right. Especially during the COVID time, one of the key things that we observed is one on the patient side, people are changing. They are accepting, they have started realizing there is a need for comprehensive health coverage, right? There is a need for OPD, not just IPD, right? A number of people who are taking this comprehensive health insurance, there is a sudden rise, right? So these are all the new people. First time people started buying insurance. So there is a change in the behavior, right? And one more important thing is before COVID, for us to sign up agreements with these healthcare service providers was all manual, right? Imagine signing up thousands of agreement will take a lot of time for us. We need a lot of people on the ground, right? And especially during COVID, one of the unexpected thing that happened is people started connecting over calls so easily, which was not so easy while they are actually outside, right? Because due to the COVID lockdowns, people are available over calls, right? And people started accepting signing agreements digitally, right? And because of this change in the behavior, within a short span, we were able to sign up thousands of agreements. Otherwise, would have taken a lot of time for us. And that actually helped us a lot. And apart from that, one of the behavioral aspect is acceptance from the insurance companies as well, right? Because of the situation and the increase of the demand of the insurance, they started exploring more solutions, right? They started exploring more solutions that can help their own customers in the current pandemic, right? So I think that was a great silver lining for them, especially in the COVID time.
Nice, amazing. Okay, my next one is a little bit of a reflection for you guys. What have you learned? So, what have you learned over the past 6 months navigating your respective startups through these very, very difficult and challenging times? That's really going to, put you in good stead going forward. One thing that you feel you've really learned through this, Zuref?
The one thing that I learned, that's
Well,
that's tough because there's a
you
whole
can
there's a whole
share
list,
too.
right?
You can share too.
Okay. Um, I think the most important thing that we learned, especially at the early stages, that it's all about people. And let me unpack that a little bit. And that is the single most important thing. I will go back again. And I think that really also speaks about EF's thesis as well. It's all about people. EF is about bringing in individuals instead of seed stage companies. And that's why it's unique. It's all about people. What has gotten us so far is the partnership that I've had with Anshul. What has gotten customers to believe in us so far is the partnership that Anshul and I have, and the ability for us to communicate to them, and the belief that we have in Retail Pulse and the passion that we show them is giving them the confidence to take a leap of faith on us. What's convincing investors now is, again, goes back to the founding pair, the people, not just us, but now it's all about bringing on more people and really increasing what we mean by people at Retail Pulse, and we're doing that every day. And so it goes down to people. And I think what has really helped us go through a pandemic, succeed through EF, and continue the way we are, is the belief that we are people at the end of the day. The most important things we hold are human bonds with each other, with our customers, with our investors. And really being together, forming that connection, having a common, aligned, massive vision, and being able to chase that and believing in it really. And it's not quantifiable. None of that is quantifiable. That is really the driving force behind anything, especially in the early days. Of course, later on, after you raise like a $15-20 million round, at that point, you have the ability to have a solid team, multiple different functions that you could never dream of before. But at the early stages, especially where EF chooses to take sort of the leap of faith on you, it's all about you as an individual. It's all about your co-founder as an individual, and it's everybody else who gets involved with your startup. It's about those people as well.
Amazing. Really, definitely a very solid point, right? Like it's hard. It gets forgotten, all the day-to-day firefighting. but it's actually the really important thing that takes you through the tough times. Ravi, what have you learned?
Sure. So I one of my learnings is irrespective of COVID, pre-COVID or post-COVID, or during COVID, speed is the key. Speed is definitely a secret sauce or one of the ingredients for winning. Right. You should stick to the speed, and to achieve speed, it's very important to have the right people, right team, right co-founder, and also the right support system which is there around you, right? So all these factors plays vital role for you to execute at a fast pace, right? Let me also add one more point here. One of the important thing that happens during pandemics is the competitive landscape changes, right? Suddenly large companies will not be able to enter into new spaces, so every company will try to uh, prolongate their runway, right? They try to cut down their budgets, they will not venture into something completely new, right? This is the exactly right time for any startups to execute at a fast pace, right? So that was one of the important thing why we feel this is the right time for anyone to join EF and start building large companies. I think that speed is a key for me, and that's my takeaway, definitely.
Super. And then maybe the last one before we kind of jump into questions. If you had one piece of advice to everyone listening in here about starting up and potentially starting up now, what would that be?
The right time is yesterday. Um, yeah, anybody asks you when the right time is, it's yesterday. And I think it's even, honestly speaking, this is now is an amazing time to start. Like right now, right when we're calling it the new normal. And I'll tell you why. If you see, you know, the trend of companies, a lot of big companies have been defined by huge shifts in either platform or in human society. I'll give just one simple example, right? Ride sharing is huge across the world, but I mean, none of that would have existed had smartphones not been so highly penetrated across the world. So it was a platform shift from a largely desktop, laptop kind of world into where smartphones are your remote control to your life. And that's why Uber can exist or Ola can exist in India. That's why Lyft can exist. If not, none of them would have existed. Um, and so if you look at a reset, it's not any kind of technology reset or technology innovation that's happened globally, but it's just been a global reset in the way that we live our lives. And I think those who can really ride the wave on this new normal and how we have now begin to live our lives as opposed to how we used to, it's almost like a new beginning. And it's almost put all potential founders at the same playing field. And I think that's what it is. The right time is yesterday. So what are you waiting for, I guess?
Amazing. So many quotable quotes from you, Zaraif.
Thank you.
Ravi, one advice for people listening in, one piece of advice.
Sure. So I completely agree with Zarif. Apart from what he said, and apart from my stress on the speed, I would advise everyone to listen to your customers very carefully. That is very important, right? So stick close to the customers, see how they are evolving, right? Sitting in a room or sitting under office building products is a different story, right? It's all about customer success. When customers succeed, you succeed, right? So that's very important for anyone to stay close to the customer, listen to them, evolve with them, right? That's one my small piece of advice.
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed the episode and are interested in being paid to find a co founder and unleashing your potential to build a world class tech startup, then head over to joinef.com and click on the Apply Now button. To listen to more episodes and explore other great articles, podcasts, and videos related to entrepreneurship, check out the content section of our website, joinef.com. Thanks again for tuning in to Entrepreneur First India Unfiltered. See you soon.